Hey everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing The Lost City of Zed. This was written and directed by James Gray. I think James Gray is very underrated, both as a writer and as a director. He is somebody who is, I think, heavily influenced by kind of the classical old Hollywood style of filmmaking, and we definitely saw that in The Immigrant, which came out a few years ago, and that was a film that I absolutely adored. That film had a very kind of Douglas Sirk feel to it. It was very melodramatic, and this new film is inspired more by a lot of the epics of the old Hollywood era. So I would say, for me, it in particular reminded me of a lot of the great David Lean epics, you know, those beautiful sweeping movies like Lawrence of Arabia or Dr. Zhivago, Bridge on the River Kwai. Those had a grand, sometimes melodramatic feel to them, but in a way that was very cerebral, very quiet. He has a very succinct style, he's very to the point. His scripts are very focused. There's very little fat to trim. Nothing is really superfluous. Everything serves a purpose, and I really appreciate that. I appreciate a very well-structured, well-made script, and this is certainly the case with this film. This film is impeccably made, beautifully shot, and all of the core themes of it are intact throughout the entire film. And that's really what stands out about it and makes it feel fully kind of pronounced and mature. This is a film that is about exploration on a surface level, at a literal level, certainly, but at its heart, this is a movie about obsession and the need to reach or to search for greatness, even if that greatness comes with great sacrifice, and even if that greatness is ultimately unattainable. But we continue to submerge ourselves in these sorts of searches, these situations, these life's quests, whatever you want to call them, in order to give ourselves purpose, in order to kind of distract us from the chaotic unknown and the idea of death. But the movie is technically about Percy Fawcett, who was an English explorer back in the early half of the 20th century, the early 1900s. And this is played by Charlie Hunnam, who I think is a really great actor. He plays the part with a real kind of, it's a pensive quality, yet this kind of intensity that comes from underneath that I found to be very compelling. During his explorations, he mostly spent it in the Amazon jungles in order to see if he can find civilizations that hadn't been discovered yet. He is very passionate about the idea of exploration and discovering things that no one else has found before. But obviously his explorations draw detractors from his home. There are a lot of reasons behind that. I mean, they range from financial reasons to political reasons. Some think that these potential civilizations are just filled with savages. But he also has a wife and 3 children that he doesn't get to see that much because he's always off on these quests. So his dreams are often put on hold, and that leads to a lot of anger, a lot of sacrifice that he sort of resents. And, you know, chasing that kind of ambition is not easy. Life gets in the way. But I like how this movie maintains a balance between Percy's exploration in the jungles and that it always goes back to his life back in England. And it's kind of a juggling act between the two. And the family dynamic, I think, between him, his wife, and his kids is, for me at least, was the most interesting. Sienna Miller plays his wife, and she's, you know, always been somebody that I really respect, certainly as an actress. She has a very kind of wise strength emanating from her, but she is very much constrained by social expectation, and certainly restrained because she is a woman and she's living in a man's world. And there are a lot of conflicts between her and her husband because, you know, she wants her husband to help her and be there as their children go older, but he's, you know, obviously on these expeditions more for himself. And, you know, at a certain point, she wants to go with him, but he, you know, obviously says that the jungle is no place for a woman. I really love the emotional dynamics between his wife and him. There are really good scenes between the two of them. And I think that just adds a whole nother layer of meaning to the protagonist, because this is a guy who, you know, he has all the best intentions in what he's doing. You know, he's doing these things not only for himself, but for a greater purpose, for the evolution of society, or, you know, different civilizations. He wants to prove that these people are not just savages, as many people in the English country tend to dismiss them as. And yet at the same time, he diminishes a woman's ambitions because it was a sign of the times. That just kind of goes to show you that even when we have very noble priorities, that we often excuse other people's priorities in order to get what we want. And that's just kind of a sign of somebody really, again, being very ambitious and having a certain sort of obsession. While he might be a very brave person and a great leader, as well as a great father when he is around, when he's present, but he's also very selfish at times and blinded by that obsession. I think that the idea of like existentialism and creation and obsession all really resonate with the director, writer-director James Gray, just because it took him so many years to get this film made. And I'm sure he went through many sacrifices, lots of hard work, because he devoted himself to his art and his obsession with creating, just as Percy has a similar drive. This movie just resonates with dreamers, and I think everyone is a dreamer to an extent. And the film does have a very kind of dreamlike quality to it at certain points, especially when they're in the Amazon, because that area just has a very romantic feel to it in terms of the way it's shot. You hear the music of Daphne and Chloe playing, which, you know, has this very kind of impressionistic, kind of mesmerizing feel to it. The camera is sort of gazing very majestically at the scenery. And yet there's always that tinge of the bittersweet in the sense that this is not truly that romantic. It is a fantasy. And that's what the Amazon really represents. It's a metaphor for what we want, for our dreams, our never-ending search for answers that we usually don't ever find. He very clearly knows what he wants on a surface level. But again, that's a very kind of romanticized idea. Really, what he wants does not exist. It's always just slightly out of reach. Like all of us, you know, we all just push and we will die trying to find those answers. And even Percy says at the beginning of the film that death is the best source to life. And I think that there's definite irony in those words. And the last shot really was, I thought, very powerful. I'm not going to discuss it here because I want you to really experience it if you haven't seen the film. But to me, it carried all of those themes of forever searching in a very kind of mystical, dreamlike sort of way that just put a close to everything very beautifully. To me, in a movie, the opening and ending shots say everything about what the film is trying to convey. And also it says a lot about the quality of the filmmaking itself. When I watched The Immigrant, which I mentioned earlier, that James Gray wrote and directed, that had a closing shot that I thought was very, very powerful, and it really stuck with me, and this one did too. Both struck me as very powerful and again tinged with that bitter sense of sadness. And those are just very powerful, as I said, very resonant themes, and they're just handled here and structured so well. So I highly recommend this film to everyone. And that is my review. Thank you all for listening. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, the link is below. You can also like my Facebook page and the link below that. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.